So Alex, could you make me the presenter? This is Angie. Thank you. Thank you.
Still waiting to see a few other board members log on, sort of few.
I know Member Lear will be joining by phone.
Remember Lear is?
Yes. Member Davis, your mic is live, and also Aaron Taylor, your mic is live. And Brian Maxwell, your mic is live.
Does anyone know if any board members are having challenges getting on line here? Well, are we ready to go, staff? Angie, you're the driver.
I am the driver and I am ready to go, board chair.
You can call me whatever you want.
Thanks. I'm ready.
It's still late in the day. Okay, hey, want to welcome everyone to the Utah State Board of Education's legislative board meeting. The special meeting was called before to address some issues prior to the special legislative session. Before we get started, let's do a quick roll call to make sure Mike and all of that will work. We'll start with board member Belknap. You here?
Hello, everyone.
Okay. Member Bolter.
Here.
Thank you. Member Cannon.
I'm here.
Okay. Vice Chair Cummins.
Here.
Thank you. Member Davis.
Here, thank you.
Member Earl.
I'm here.
Member Gravitt.
Here.
Thank you. Member Hanson.
Good afternoon.
Okay. Good afternoon. Member Haynes.
I'm here.
Okay. Board member Lear's on the phone. Okay. Are you on the phone?
Sorry, did you say Board Member Thorpe?
Board Member Lear.
Oh,
Or Lear.
I don't believe she's on yet.
Okay. Member Marsh.
Here.
Thank you. Member Nielsen. And I'm not seeing him on also. Member Nielsen. Okay. Member Newell.
Here.
Thank you. Member Thorpe.
Here.
You and Member Huntsman. I'm here, so we have more than enough to get started here. If Board Member Lear or Nielsen join us, will someone let me know and we'll recognize them in this group. So we have a couple hours set aside here to address a few issues that are on our agenda. I might as well get started on it. The next agenda item after roll call is special legislative recommendations and requests for statutory changes. Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings, you're going to take point on that?
I will. Thank you, Chair. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent Policy with the State Board of Education. Good afternoon, everyone. We have two bills that we'll be discussing today. Both bills, for your information, will be reviewed and discussed tomorrow. I'm going to show you right here the updated Education Interim Committee agenda, which was just posted this morning. You can see that both, oh, I apologize. I have the wrong version of the agenda up, but both of these bills will be discussed tomorrow afternoon in the Education Interim Committee. And so first, it's funny that both of the legislators whose bills we'll be discussing today are Representative Moss. We have Representative Carol Moss, who's running the School Emergency Drills Amendments Bill, and then Representative Jefferson Moss, who's running the Public Education Funding and Enrollment Amendments Bill. So we'll go ahead and start with the Representative Carol Moss bill. This bill, you may remember last week or 2 weeks ago when we met, we mentioned that we've had requests from LEAs who've asked for some additional flexibility related to emergency drills for the 2020-21 school year. And you'll remember that the board made a motion to waive our board rule with respect to a requirement for LEAs to conduct their first evacuation drill within the first 10 days of the school year. So here you can see, starting on line 114, that the bill would create two essentially ways that LEAs will now have flexibility. So first, the bill exempts or waives the emergency evacuation drill requirements through March 1st of 2021. It does, however, require, as you can see here, starting on line 117, that in lieu of the evacuation drills, that the LEAs provide in-class instruction to students in an age-appropriate manner that describes the procedures for emergency evacuation for fire or other evacuation needs. Also, it does state later on below here that LEAs may substitute their monthly required emergency evacuation drill with a security or safety drill, which may include shelter in place, earthquake drill, or lockdown for violence. And so this bill is meant to provide LEAs some flexibility, considering what's going on in the COVID era, to make sure that we don't have a situation where students are evacuating the building and clustering together. And anyway, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer questions related to HB 6004.
Okay, questions from board members regarding HB 6004. Board member Earl.
Hi, my question has to do with line 123. It says for the period beginning March 1st, 2021. Sorry, is that?
Yes.
Should that be 2020 or not? Is that intended to be starting at the end of March? Maybe.
I apologize. Did you finish your question? I didn't mean to cut you off, Board Member Earl.
No, you're good. Yeah, that's good.
So it looks like we've got two different time periods here. We've got this H here that applies to the beginning day of the 2020-21 school year until the end of February. And then we've got beginning March 1st through the end of the school year. So thank you for that question. So it looks like here in from now until February 28th, their LEAs are not required to conduct emergency evacuation drills, but they are required to provide in-class instruction to students in an age-appropriate manner. And then beginning March 1 to the end of the 2021 school year, so essentially March 1 through June 30th of 2021, then the evacuation drills can be substituted with a different either, as you can see, a shelter in place drill, an earthquake drill, or lockdown. So it doesn't look like they would then be required for those last 3 or 4 months to provide the in-class instruction, but instead they could either do the emergency evacuation drill or they could substitute it with one of the other drills listed there on lines 125 through 127.
All right, thank you. That's the clarification I need. I apologize. I didn't see these on here earlier, so I hadn't gone through them thoroughly. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, questions from board members regarding House Bill 6004? And I'm not seeing any other questions. So at this time, I guess we could continue, or I'd entertain a motion regarding the House Bill 6004. That's up to the board members here to.
If you'd like me to, Chair, I could move forward with the second bill.
Okay,
or
please move
Okay,
forward. I'm not seeing any.
great.
Okay.
The second bill has not been numbered yet, but unless it has in the last hour or so and I missed it. But Representative Jefferson Moss gave me permission to go ahead and share with you the not yet numbered draft bill, and he anticipates that this is the way the bill will be once it is numbered. And so as you can see, I'll kind of work through some of these things. Won't seem new to you. A couple of them are new issues. However, the language on lines 83 through 88 provides the state board the flexibility to use a student enrollment count other than the October 1 enrollment count for purposes of determining a growth factor. And this is important when we talk about school district and charter school funding. As you know, and we've discussed recently, we anticipate that there might be more migration of students from district to charter, charter to home, home to distance, or, a lot of movement this year. So you'll remember that in your last board meeting, we passed an emergency rule, R277419, which allowed the superintendent to do a student enrollment poll on September 9th of this year, as well as an additional enrollment count sometime in December or January. And the idea is to use the data in September, October, and December to be able to distribute funding or make corrections as we move forward. So this language here gives the board the authority to use an average daily membership count on different days other than just October 1. The next change was kind of as I've heard, was more of an error that just needed to be fixed. And we have one or two small school districts that were supposed to be in this category on line 149, but fell into the category in 150. So this middle category has been removed so that most of our small school districts, I believe, now qualify for the 83 weighted pupil units in lieu of 56. The next change, that's just a technical cross-reference. The next thing, this bill does reinstate the program for National Board Certified Teachers, the salary supplement. This program was repealed along with 5 others during the June special session in House Bill 5012. And the legislature has chosen to reinstate this bill, and you'll see in a moment, reinstate the program in this bill, and you'll see that the appropriation is also reinstated at the end. The next section includes the changes that allow a charter school for the 2021-22 school year to have an enrollment preference for students who were enrolled in their charter school prior to the 2021 school year, but they left the charter school to attend an online school or to participate in homeschooling. And so you'll remember that the board, we discussed that during our last board meeting. The next one, because the legislature anticipates and knows that the board may take a motion to support the state charter school board's action last week to essentially suspend the enrollment cap portions of the charter agreements of both Utah Connections Academy and Utah Virtual Academy. This language here it kind of deals with that situation for school years in 21 and 22 moving forward. And I don't want to get too hyper technical, but in this section of code, a school may submit a request to the state board for an enrollment cap increase above their cap if they have many students who are participating in the statewide online education program. To my knowledge, we've never had a charter school request that, but we wanted to make it clear that that for the 21-22 school year, if a school were to request that, it would be based on their enrollment from the 19-20 school year and not for the 2021. And then the last policy change in this bill is this bill provides you, the state board, to use up to $8 million of your federal elementary and secondary school emergency funds and non-lapsing minimum school program funds for charter school local replacement funding in the 2021 school year related to an anticipated potential increase in charter school enrollment. Again, this is the issue where back in October 1, we get estimates, and then the legislature funds enrollment across the state for school districts and charter schools based on those estimates. And due to COVID-19, we know, and the legislature believes, there's a possibility that those estimates may be off. And the legislature here is providing the board with the authority to use those funds if needed. Sorry, I was just muting a couple of people that to clear up that way the background noise. And so this gives you the authority to use some of those minimum school program funds, the non-lapsing balances, as well as the emergency funds to cover that if needed. And then last, you'll see there's 2 appropriations in here. There's the appropriation for the National Board Certified Teacher Program at $246,000 approximately. And then $3 million was reinstated for the English Learner Software Support Program. And there's some intent language about the board distributing that to LEAs directly, and then the LEAs will select the provider. So in the past, we did an RFP at our level. For this year, the funding will go directly to the LEAs, and the LEAs will select their vendor. It does have an immediate effective date, and that is the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions, comments from board members. We'll start with Board Member Thorpe.
Angie, I just wondered, as you were reading through it and going through the changes, I just wanted to, it did not sound to me like there were any restrictions along these lines, but I just wanted to double check that there are so any charter school that's interested that provides an online offering could potentially apply for the cap increases based on this language. It wouldn't just be the ones that have specifically already reached out to us. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you for that question. This language here, and I'm just scrolling to the right place, you'll notice that the language does not explicitly provide the board with the authority or non-authority to increase or approve increases in enrollment. The motion that will likely take place later in this meeting, or something that you as a board may want to consider, is supporting the state charter school board's recommendation to suspend a portion of their charter agreements. So I get this language here, the 8 million, is not specific to any two schools, although we are aware of at least two schools who are interested in increasing their enrollment caps. But to answer your question directly, this is not limited to just those two schools. And in fact, based on the motion that the State Charter School Board supported last Thursday, which was an increase of 2,500 students, meaning that their motion was for 2,500, this 8 million would assume 3,000 new charter school students in the system. And so it's a very high amount, and it's unlikely that that amount will be triggered, but it is a kind of a fail-safe in case the board needs it to support increased costs in charter school local replacement funding. And if we need to talk about that a little bit more, about the impacts, I think that Scott Jones might be addressing some of that when we get to either item 3 or 4, and I'd be happy to turn the time to him if that didn't answer your question.
Did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you. That does answer my question. Thanks, Angie.
Great, thanks.
Member Cannon?
Thank you, Chair. Angie, I am just wondering about this 8 million in federal funds to cover the local charter school replacement funding. So tell me how the charter school local replacement funding is currently wrapped into the minimum school program, and this 8 million is additional money just to cover new student increases. Is that correct?
It's not new funding, Board Member Cannon. There's not an additional appropriation here. If we were receiving 8 million additional dollars, you would see it down here. What this is speaking to is funding that we already have. So we have two pots of money that are referred to in these lines. One is our ESSER funds. The other are non-lapsing minimum school program funds. In prior board meetings, you may have heard of the $20 million that was referred to. That's one-time funds that the legislature kind of essentially gathered all of our carry forward balances that we had in a bunch of little different programs and brought all of that together and reappropriated it to us in one lump sum. And Deputy Scott Jones, if you want to jump in at any time, I'm happy to let you take this question. But those non-lapsing funds, the 20 million, are meant to be a cushion for the board in exactly for this reason. If it's not just for the two schools that'll be coming to us today, but it could be large increases or decreases in enrollment across the state. Due to, again, students moving from one district or charter school to another. And I think the legislature wanted the board to have that $20 million cushion there in case we needed it. So this $8 million is essentially the permission from the legislature for the board to use up to $8 million for purposes of funding local replacement funding increases that might result due to the student migration.
Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, did you want to add anything to Deputy Superintendent Angie Stallings' explanation?
Sir, this is Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones. No, I don't. She covered it really well. This is why it's important to remember that we're going to take a look at where our student counts are, a snapshot, if you will, on September 9th, so that we can just really, have an earlier than October 1st measurement of the migration of students, during this particular situation. So Angie covered it to the T. We have the 20 million in the basic program, and we have another 10 million in the related to basic program. So as Board Member Cannon asked, it is wrapped up in the minimum school program, but we're just going to have to see, just what the impacts are. What this bill does is it makes the legislature and the board, gives the board the flexibility of using those funds. So we'd bring this back to you once we kind of see, how things are developing as far as, where kids or families are choosing to go early on in the school year. I hope that helps, subject to any questions or concerns, Chair.
And did you have a follow-up, Board Member Cannon?
No, thank you. I appreciate the context you've given this.
Member Davis?
Thank you, Chair. I'm in to make an amendment after someone makes a motion.
Okay. Member Earl?
I will wait on my question. Thank you.
Okay. Member Belknap?
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. This might be a rude way to say it, but I'm just trying to get clarity for sure. So the legislature in this bill is allowing us to use our own funds to leaven this out. Can I get a quick answer on that?
Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, you answer that one.
Ma'am, that's through the chair, ma'am. That's not, that's not rude at all. There are certain limits to the extent that the board can move funds around, so to speak. For instance, you can move funds, down from the basic program, so to speak. But what this does is allows, the flexibility for you to move funding around to adapt to the particular circumstances. So they're basically, there's a lot of trust in this bill. There's a lot of just great movement of funds that, would be in tune with or in line with whatever we're experiencing earlier on in the school year. I hope that helps, subject to any questions or concerns from Board Member Belknap, Chair.
Chair, can I have a follow-up to that one? And I still have one more. Okay,
Yeah.
So Scott, could this actually, when we do the September 1 count earlier or the September 1 look, could this end up being that the charter cap is leavened between all of the schools? Maybe some are down, some are up, and we might not need to use this money?
Chair,
Yes,
if I may?
Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones.
Yeah, Board Member Belknap, yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, there may not be a need to move this money around. Basically, what we're doing is, each year, back to Deputy Superintendent Stallings' point, last year we made estimates of where we would be at early in the school year this year. But now with the situation, what this does is allows flexibility for us to move funding around to adapt to or meet the requirements of our families and our children are based on what they're choosing. But yeah, you're right. It could be that our estimates are not that far off. That there is some migration, but that ultimately the funding is sufficient to cover what we had estimated a year ago. Does that help answer your question, Board Member Belknap?
Yes, and Chair, and I have one more. Angie,
Okay.
at some point you were talking about the statewide online education program being somehow included or not included. Could you give me clarity on that? Because students taking a course and or courses from the statewide online education program are not counted as part of the student count in a school.
Deputy Superintendent Stallings.
Yes, thank you. So this language, and I'm showing it on the screen right now, it starts here on lines 344 on. A number of years ago, the legislature passed this bill that allows a charter school who might have a large number of students participate in the statewide online education program. What they were worried about, because again, charter schools do have enrollment caps, that if they were to have maybe a fourth or a half of their students taking a lot of courses through the statewide online education program, and then of course they pass on the funding to those providers, that they could see a decrease in funds that come to their school without having the ability to fill in additional students to cover those periods that now the student, so let's say the student we'll use one of our schools today since they're here with us. Let's use Utah Connections Academy. Let's say that they have 1,000 students, 250 of them are participating in the statewide online education program in a significant way, meaning even up to half of their courses, they're participating in the SOEP. You could see where if they couldn't replace that funding from those 250 students that they're now sending to the provider that they anticipated having, but they're not able to add another 50 or 100 students, this would actually allow them to to request an increase in the enrollment capacity at 25 times the number of students that are enrolled. So in this case, let's say they had 250 students, they'd be able to times that by 0.25. And I apologize, I'm going to throw out maybe 63 students. That means that they could then increase their enrollment caps by 63 students. Is that helpful? This is an existing language. What the legislative drafters were trying to anticipate is if a school, and I'll use the Utah Connections Academy again, were to get a 1-year increase of 500 or 1,000 students, what they wouldn't want is the 0.25 to be times that larger amount, but instead it would be based on their 2019-20 school year. Is that helpful, Board Member Belknap?
Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Hanson. Board Member Scott Hanson, your hand's raised.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. Questions about line 149 to 151. Looks like it goes on to 154. I just wondered, anytime that we have steps instead of a kind of a per capita or per head funding scheme, I wonder if any of our districts will be affected. I'm looking at some old data that shows Wayne and Rich right around the 470, 492 mark. And that's a pretty big step between 500 and less than 500 as far as funding. And then at the 1,000, I see Garfield and North Summit, maybe Kane, right in that area. Do we think any of our districts are going to be affected adversely by this? They have 502 students and so receive 28 WPUs instead of the 83.
Thank you, Board Member Hanson. Chair, should I answer that?
Yes, please.
We actually anticipate the opposite, that there were a couple of districts that were like at 255 that we anticipated being under 250. And so they only would have qualified for the 56, but now due to this, they're going to qualify for the 83 additional weighted pupil units. As to those that are in the low 500s, I am not aware. There's no impact to them because you can see they're still at the 28 weighted units, no matter what with this bill. But this will help those districts who have student numbers between 251 and 500. They will now qualify for 83 instead of 56.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick follow-up. I understand. I understand why we did that. I'm just wondering if there are districts, have we done that homework and looked to see if there are districts right at the 500 mark or right at the 1,000 mark? The difference between the 1,000 and 1,001 isn't as significant, but between 500 and 501, that's fairly significant. Are there any districts right in that 500 zone that may be affected?
Andy,
This is Scott. Oh, go ahead. No.
Okay, go ahead, Scott. Deputy Superintendent Jones.
So to answer Board Member Hanson's question, I'm not aware of any districts, but I can come back. I'll just double check on that, sir. But to answer your question, at this point, no, I'm not aware of any districts like that, sir. But we'll check.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Board Member Davis, your hand is still up, but that was for after a motion is on the table. Is that correct?
Correct. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
Chair Huntsman, this is Lorraine. Sorry to interrupt, but Member Lear is on the phone and she would like to ask a question, but she's been muted and can't unmute herself.
Okay, so can the driver unmute that?
I think I
number?
just unmuted Board Member Lear. Board Member Lear, could you speak?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I have to go back a bit. My question came up earlier. If related to the $8 million of the $20 million that the board has, that the legislature has graciously given us the permission to use to support these charter caps that might be raised. I have two questions related to that, and it would cover the charter or the local replacement amount. And so I have two questions related to that. First of all, if we didn't use it, is it as the legislature said that the board could only use it for this purpose, or if the board chose not to use it for the purpose of increasing the caps for charter schools, could it be used for something else? That's my first question.
Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones.
I'm sorry, sir. I couldn't catch the first part of her question. Can she repeat the question, please?
Yeah, let me try. It's the $8 million from the $20 million the board has that the legislature would allow the board to use to cover the local replacement costs if charter school caps were raised. So
is there more flexibility?
Yes.
And could it be used for something else if it wasn't used for just to cover the local replacement cost, was my question.
So the answer is yes to both questions. I mean, holistically, we're going to have the flexibility, and really, it's just gonna, it's gonna depend on what we see when we take that first snapshot on September 9th. So if there is a migration, a significant migration of students from districts into online charter schools or charter schools, we would make those adjustments, appropriately, right, for those. If there's not, but we've missed estimates in other areas, I'm sure that we'd be able to, and I can't really predict or say where that would be or what that would be, but I just feel confident that, by virtue of this process and our ability to take a look, to have the LEAs let us know on September 9th that we will be able to cover down on almost any kind of contingency or any kind of situation that we see related to parent or family choice or student choice. Does that answer your question, Board Member Lear? Subject to questions?
Sort of, but I have a follow-up to that. Yes, it adequately answers it. I have a follow-up, if that's all right, Chair.
Yes, please.
My follow-up is, if this snapshot reveals an increase on September 9th, will there be an ability later on in the school year, say in mid-November or even January, if we find these students are coming back to the traditional schools off of those online schools, can we recoup the money that was covering local replacement, or is that once we send it to the charters after September 9th, is it all gone forever, or does it go out in increments so that we could stop if we find the students are coming back?
Chair, this is Scott. Yes, we would make adjustments, and we do plan on taking another snapshot, is my understanding, in or around the January timeframe. So to answer your questions, we do have the ability to adjust, if you will, or recover, or basically dollars follow the students. So the timing of that, though, may be months, or but we would be able to make adjustments to that.
Okay.
If we saw returning students and doing all that, but the timing of it all might be, I'd have to, depending on where they're going, what they return to in the beginning of the year, that's all subject to that, and we'd have to take a look at that again mid-year, ma'am.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thanks, Chair.
Your next, did you have a follow-up? Did you have one additional
No.
question? That did it? Okay.
Chair, this is Scott. Okay, I'm sorry.
No.
Chair Scott.
Hey, Scott.
May I follow up to Board Member Scott Hansen's earlier question, sir,
Yes.
please?
Yes.
Okay, sir, both Rich and Summit are under their respective thresholds. So Rich is around the, to your question about who's around the 500 or the 1,000 mark. Board Member Hansen, Rich School District is around the 500 mark. Summit is around the 1,000 mark. However, based on the application, if you will, or this bill, we should be able to make sure that they're not harmed in any way. In fact, they probably would gain funding by way of this bill. So my staff has contacted me and let me know that those were the two districts that we need to call out or answer for your question. Rich and Summit. Rich around 500, Summit around 1,000. So I wanted to follow up with Board Member Hansen while I had the opportunity. Subject to more questions on that follow-up, sir.
I'm not seeing additional hands up, so thank you for bringing that to the board's attention. I'm not seeing any other questions regarding this agenda item number 2. Is there any motions that Vice Chair Brittany Cummins? Do you have a question?
Yeah. I'd like to move that the board support HB 6004 school emergency drill amendments and draft bill from Representative Jefferson Moss, public education funding and enrollment amendments. Excuse me.
So do we have a second?
Thorpe, second.
Okay, Board Member Thorpe. Discussion you want to speak to your motion, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins?
No, I appreciate the legislators who have been willing to address many of the concerns that we've brought forward and providing flexibility for us and for the school districts as we move into a very uncertain year. So I am in favor of these changes.
Board Member Davis?
Thanks. I would like to make an amendment to the second half of the motion to the draft bill, public education funding and enrollment amendment. And I believe that Angie has wording on that. I'll wait for her to get that on the screen so you can see that. Thank you. So this would be in conjunction with the amendment that's on the table. And I move that staff work with the legislature to reinstate the following programs: small school district administrative costs, appropriation for intensive special education costs, early graduation incentives, math and science opportunities for students, and salary supplement for national board certified teachers. And I'd like to speak to the amendment.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. Board Member Marsh.
Okay, Marsh is a second. Board Member Davis is speaking to the proposed amendment.
Yes, thank you. So I think that some of us may have been under the understanding that some of these programs had a temporary funding cut for 1 year. And, some things have come out since PEA that actually these programs were just completely repealed by the legislature in the special session. They were taken away permanently. And I think that we didn't have a conversation necessarily about that. So I am asking for these to be reinstated. It would be great if the legislature reinstates the funding to go with these. If they don't, at least we have the language on the table so we can have the broader conversation in the general session if we do or do not want these programs to stay or go. And then as we work through our own funding scenarios and we work through our enrollment attritions and our COVID emergency situations, should there be anything left in a month, 2, 3, we may come back and revisit funding on these things, but we can't do that if the language in the code has disappeared. It has to be reinstated. So I'm asking for, I'd love to see us all get behind reinstating this language so that we have the opportunity for a broader conversation later on. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Davis. Discussion to the proposed amendment. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins, is your hand raised?
Yeah, just a quick question about the motion. So is this with the intent that this is separate from these two bills, or we're wanting this to be added to Representative Jefferson's Moss's bill?
May I, Chair?
Yes.
I think that we would like this to be added to Representative Moss's bill, and if that choice is not made, that we would like it to be brought about through legislation, even if another legislator chooses to work on that. But yes, it would be in conjunction with the second half as an addendum to the second half of your motion. Thank you.
One additional question.
Yes, follow up.
So the last item, salary supplement for National Board Certified Teachers, was that already taken care of, if I understood the bill correctly?
Yes, it is. But we are just putting our support in for that with these others.
Okay.
So
thank you.
I see it is redundant, a little bit redundant, but it's part of the amendment. Board Member Belknap.
Thanks, Chair. Board Member Davis, should this be a legislative ask that we ask, or should it be a part of these two bills? I'm still a little confused, like Vice Chair Brittany Cummins was asked. I need help. I don't see how it fits as an amendment.
May I, Chair?
Yes, Member Davis.
Well, one of these 5 existing programs that was cut has actually already been added into the legislation to be considered on Thursday. We would like the language reinstated in code for these other programs added into the legislation to be considered on Thursday so that the funding discussion can be had. If a fiscal note gets added by choice of the legislature, that would be great. If not, we can at least have the opportunity to have the conversation with our own funds for this year. And then if that doesn't happen because we need those funds for emergency, then the language of the code is still reinstated so that when general session time comes, we can have the broader conversation for funding and whatnot. But that's not going to happen if all of these codes are gone. And there was some surprise, quite honestly, not just by our staff or state board members, but by legislators themselves. Even one that sits on the PEA, that if you go back and listen to the PEA meeting, that said, did we do that? Did we get rid of these permanently? And that was a surprise. So I think to take the surprise element out of the whole thing, we ask for this to be reinstated, and then we can have monetary conversations again, unless they choose to add those in on Thursday.
Follow up, Chair?
Yes.
Thank you.
Member Belknap.
So, Board Member Davis, I absolutely agree that we need these back on the table. I don't have a problem with that piece of it. I'm just trying to figure out if Legislator Moss already has his bill ready. What if he doesn't accept our amendment? Are we in agreement with his bill, or are we only going to agree with his bill if he includes these amendments?
The language in the amendment, proposed amendment, just directs staff to work with legislature to reinstate. It doesn't give a condition of support.
Thank you.
But just keeps it alive, which is still
Chair,
a legislative ask.
Chair, it's Carol.
Okay, Carol.
I'm sorry.
I keep looking for your hand and I forget that you're on the phone. I
am.
Okay.
I had a question related to the motion and also it's related to the motion and related to the bill, the proposed motion about the bill, both.
Okay, we're talking
if that's
about the proposed amendment. So
let me just say then about the proposed amendment. I understood that the bill there was a year, it was a year, what I'm trying to say, there was it was only for a year that these certain other things would happen. Whereas if this information or these programs were added to, or at least discussed, there would be an opportunity for the programs to be reinstated for a longer term period. So it's a motion I support because I think it provides longevity for these programs that are all very excellent. That's my comment.
Superintendent Stallings, can you speak to that? Whether it was just
Yes.
temporary or completely repealed?
Well, the 5 programs were actually repealed, and I think what Board Member Lear is mentioning, it occurred in this bill in, and I don't think I've unpaused one moment, in HB 5012. And I agree with Board Member Lear that I think many of us were under the understanding that the funding was going to be cut for a year for the 2021 school year, but that the policies wouldn't necessarily be permanently cut until a later date when we could discuss the programs, potentially in the 2021 session. This bill was numbered late in the special session, and we were really focused on the amendments and somehow missed the repealers that you can see here that start in 5012. They're here, and they are the programs that Board Member Davis has added in her motion. And so I think what Board Member Lear is trying to state is somewhat of maybe a rhetorical question, which is, or point or opinion, that many of us were under the understanding that programs weren't going to be repealed permanently until a later date, and that the funding cuts were temporary. And so I think she was just sharing her opinion that then that would fit if we reinstated the funding or the statutory language. But Chair Huntsman, may I make a comment?
Yes.
That and I don't know if Board Member Lear, you want to finish or share?
No, I agree with. Thank you for clarifying that. That was what I was saying about those programs. Yeah. Okay.
One thing I did want to mention, I personally did ask whether or not we could reinstate these programs, just the statutory language for now, and whether there would be some sort, and whether that was possible. And the person I spoke with told me that if the legislature were to reinstate the language for these programs, it would trigger a fiscal impact. And so they did not see a way to reinstate the programs without the funding being attached. And I could see that being the case definitely for some more than others, because, for example, small school district administrative costs, that as soon as that language is in there, unless you could put subject to legislative funding. But I will say one other option you could do, and again, we've discussed this with some, and there was not, is you could add something like this, which is similar to the language that you saw for the 8 million with local charter replacement. You could see if you could get the authority for the state board to use up to a certain amount of the minimum school program funds to support one of these programs. I think in some ways it is a little bit of a heavier lift, so to speak, because the Executive Appropriations Committee met today. They took their actions on appropriations, and usually that's the committee that makes final actions related to appropriations. But that might be a way that you could get around or say that this program or these programs would be put in the bill subject to some sort of authority of remaining existing funds after a certain point. But I guess I just wanted to raise to you, it may not be as simple as it sounds to just reinstate the statute, because it will trigger a fiscal impact.
Board Member Earl.
Okay, Angie, that kind of answered some of my questions. My question centered around the small school district administrative item, and specifically, I'm wondering how this impacts where we're already giving weighted pupil units. We've made legislative changes to that. I just wondered if that now negates the one, or if there would be, they would be getting both fundings, or how that works. And then also I'd like to know if that one actually, if charters are included in any of that, or if this is simply as small school districts. So could you speak to that if you don't mind?
Deputy Superintendent Stallings.
And Scott, I may need your support and help and assist on this one.
Jones.
I do have the language showing here. Are you familiar with this program, Deputy Superintendent Jones, and who qualifies?
Which program are we talking about?
It's
the small school district administrative cost. Are they? Is it right? Is it all strictly districts, or are charter schools included?
They are small school districts, sir. For that particular program, they were small school districts, not charter schools.
Chair?
Board Member Earl, do you have a follow-up?
May I add?
Yeah, go ahead, and then I'll.
And I apologize, I asked that question while I was pulling up the language. I do have the language right here now. It does look like there's the first subsection is the small school district administrative costs. It looks like the second subsection is funding for administrative costs for charter schools. If this whole section was repealed, which I believe it was, it looks like it's funding for both small school district and charter school administrative costs, unless they move this language to another section. And I can hurry and do some research on that.
So, well, in the interest of time, and then also what's on the agenda, these are really good questions in that, but the reality is all of these are repealed. If we go back to the proposed amendment, and not without getting down into the weeds of how they work and et cetera, the question, the amendment before the board is, do we have staff work with the legislature in an attempt to bring these or keep these on the books with or without a fiscal note, which also puts us in a position to have even more conversation as one of two things is going to happen. They'll either do it or they won't. And if they won't, then we have opportunities between now and our next session, the next general session, to have discussion and bring these back. But I think the more we get down into the weeds and get into specifics of what we want, then we're going to find ourselves picking and choosing out of these 5 programs, which ones we want to make a preference or whatever. So I just want to go back to the intent of that the person that made the amendment, their attempt was, and I'll restate the beginning portion of the motion, is to have staff work with the legislature to reinstate the statutory requirements for the following program. And it's a small school district administrative costs, appropriation for intensive special education costs, early graduation incentives, math and science opportunities for students, early supplement for national board certified teachers. That is the amendment that's before the board. I'm just trying to reel it back in a little bit to what is on the table.
Chair Huntsman?
Yes.
This is Lorraine. I just need a little clarification on the motion. So what I had is that to work with the legislature to reinstate the following programs in the public education funding and enrollment amendments bill. Is that correct? That it's quickly to put those
Yes.
back in that bill. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
To attach that to that. Yes. Thank you. And through the discussion, there was talk, well, is it a legislative ask or et cetera? But that's the amendment that Member Davis has made and Board Member Marsh has made. Further discussion to the proposed amendment. Board Member Davis, your hand is still up. Did you have additional or?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I just want to add, just thank you for bringing up the thought about the fiscal note and the financial requirements. We already have been dealing with those situations with programs whose code has remained on the books, but no funding has been given to the code. And so we've had to go back in our board rule, in our law and licensing committee, and add words such as subject to legislative funding or things like that. And I'm certain that that could be added into this when we get to that point. But at this point, we're just asking for the language of the bill to be put back in. And we've added here public education, funding and enrollment, through that bill. I would hope that if it doesn't happen through that bill, another legislature could pick it up and do that. But that is what we're asking for, is for the language to be put back in and considered, and can be financially considered either by them or us. But I don't think we need to add that in at that point. That's everybody's option anyway, if the language gets back in the bill.
Okay. Not seeing any other discussion, so board members prepared to vote on this. The proposed amendment is to add to the Public Education Funding and Enrollment Amendments draft bill, say that staff work with the legislature to reinstate the statutory language for the following programs in the Public Education Funding and Enrollment Amendments draft bill. It includes small school district administration of administrative costs, appropriation for intensive special education costs, early graduation incentives, math and science opportunities for students, salary supplement for national board certified teachers. Did I state that correctly, Lorraine? Or close?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. All in favor, please vote. And I think we'll have one phone.
Chair, it's Carol. I'm an aye.
Okay. Okay, the voting is complete. And the voting is unanimous. The amendment passes. We have an amended, we'll take our voting off the screen. We have a proposed amended motion. So the proposed amended motion is being typed up there right now. Is there any other further discussion to the proposed amended motion? I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to read it out.
Oops, sorry.
Okay, the proposed amended motion reads that the board support House Bill 6004 and draft bill Public Education Funding and Enrollment Amendments, and ask that the staff work with the legislature to reinstate the statutory language for the following program in the Public Education Funding and Enrollment Amendment draft bill. To include the small school district administrative costs, former section 53F-2-306, appropriations for extensive special education costs, former section 53F-2-309, early graduation incentives, 53F-2-501, math and science opportunities for students, former section 53F-2-505, and salary supplement for national board certified teachers, former section 53F-2-521. Is there any further discussion to the amended motion? I am not seeing any hands, so at this time, please vote. Okay, so we have somebody on the line. Is that Board Member Lear?
Chair, yes, I vote aye.
Okay. The voting is complete and the voting is unanimous. Motion passes. Thank you. Deputy Superintendent Stallings, I'm not seeing any other hands raised or anything. I think that concludes this portion.
I agree, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll invite Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones. Talk about any legislative funding requests. Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Yeah, sir, this is Scott. I think we've covered it, and I put this agenda item on not knowing how far along we'd be with the bill. So with the board making the actions that they have, you know, and Angie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or Deputy Superintendent Stallings can correct me if I'm wrong, but the bill covers the ESSER funds piece to this, and then your support for the bill, I think, covers this particular agenda item now. Do you feel that same way, Deputy Superintendent Stallings?
Yes, Scott, I do. I think that
Okay.
the motion will come at a later date once we know the actual student enrollments, right? And
Right.
then the
Yeah.
board may need to take some action to use those non-lapsing balances or the ESSER funds, but that will be later, as you mentioned before.
Right.
And I agree on my end too.
So I think we got it covered for, you know, now, you know, and then we just need to see where we're at, you know, September 9th in the future. Thanks,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you. We will move forward. Next is under item 4, request for enrollment cap flexibility for fiscal year 2020-2021 for Utah Connections Academy and Utah Virtual Academy. Deputy Superintendent Stallings, we'll have you introduce what's happening here, and then for the board, I think Jennifer Lambert, State's Charter School Board Executive Director, will speak to us for a few minutes. And then Connections Academy presentation will be 3 to 5 minutes, and Utah Virtual Academy's presentation will be 3 to 5 minutes. It's probably best that we get through the presentations and then come back and ask questions. Probably the best way to address this. So with that, Deputy Superintendent Stallings, please begin.
Thank you, Chair. I did want to just bring your attention to the fact we do have one hand raised. I'm not sure if Board Member Belknap, oh, never mind. The hand was, oh, it's up. Did you want to acknowledge Board Member Belknap, Chair?
Yes, I'm, there we go. Yep,
I apologize, Chair. I would just
no,
like
you're
everyone
fine,
to know.
Member Belknap.
Thank you, Chair. I will not be in being involved in this discussion, and I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation and the vote.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Belknap.
All right. Thank you, Chair. So I'll move forward. Just wanted to provide some background and start the conversation before we turn the time, as Chair Huntsman stated, to Director Jennifer Lambert, and I believe Board Member Cindy Phillips is also on the line, and then to our two charter schools who've joined us today. As you know, and you've got backup information available in Civic Clerk, two schools, the Utah Connections Academy and Utah Virtual Academy, made a request to the board back in late July for student enrollment increases. Since that time, the schools also met with and presented to the State Charter School Board, who is their authorizer. And that happened last Thursday. Both Board Member Haynes and I were in attendance during that meeting and listened in on the discussion. And the State Charter School Board made a motion to support a temporary increase in student enrollment by 1,000 students for Utah Connections Academy and 1,500 students for Utah Virtual Academy for the 2020-21 school year only. Since last Thursday, there were a couple of potential changes to statute that you may have seen language on, but we've now seen that Representative Jefferson Moss's bill does not address this issue specifically. And so Director Jennifer Lambert and potentially Board Member Phillips will be giving you some additional context on the motion they made. But in line, there is an email that is in backup that Chair Delana Tonks from the State Charter School Board did send to board leadership, and it is approved. It is uploaded, but it provides the context of what the State Charter School Board is proposing to do, which is to provide flexibility by suspending portions of the charter agreements, the portion related to enrollment caps, for these two schools for the 2021 school year, and temporarily allow them to enroll the additional students. And what the State Charter School Board is looking for today is a signal of support from the State Board of Education for their action. And Chair, I think I am done for now with that, the background information. I think we could turn the time to Executive Director Lambert.
Okay, Executive Director Lambert. And then I think with you is Charter Board Member Phillips. State Charter Board Member Phillips. I'm not sure if she's participating in your presentation or not. So, Director Lambert.
Thank you. Yes, Member Phillips is here if you have any questions, but Deputy Superintendent Stallings did an excellent job giving you context to explain a little more about this. As we all know, we're in unprecedented times. With the COVID pandemic, you have many parents that are seeking online options and different ways to be able to protect their children. And in June, the State Charter School Board allowed flexibility to all of our brick and mortar charter schools to provide online or blended options to be able to help with that. This we see as being, it's aligned with that, but it is appropriate for these two online charter schools who have made a request because they have such high demand from parents wanting a school that is a fully online school that has been doing online for a number of years, and they are wanting to go there. So we did offer flexibility. It's a temporary flexibility in their enrollment cap for this year for up to 1,000 students for Utah Connections Academy and up to 1,500 students for Utah Virtual Academy. I want to let you know that while this is temporary, these schools are open and able to apply for permanent increases through the traditional way. And it would go through the process that was approved by this board, I believe just last month, the expansion process. And Utah Connections Academy has already put in an application to do just that. We are requesting from the schools assurances that the rigor of their academics will not decrease with the additional students, that they will have the capacity to handle it. We also are asking assurances that after this school year that they will not enroll additional new students until they are back within their caps. The schools feel that either through, if they're successful receiving an expansion request this next year, for beyond this year, or through natural attrition, that they will be able to be back within their caps after this year. But because of the unprecedented demand of parents for online education, they do need this increase for this year. And so we are asking that you support us in this. We want to make sure that we aren't doing this outside of, while it's outside of the traditional route, we do want to make sure that we have your support on it, and that it's to be able to meet the needs of students and parents right now in dealing with COVID-19. As Deputy Superintendent Stallings mentioned, these schools are also here to present, and Member Phillips is also here, and I am here if you have any additional questions for us.
Member Phillips, did you want to add to anything before we move on?
I simply wanted to thank the board for hearing the context of the decisions that we made. It is unprecedented for us to do this, especially in the wake of a new expansion process that was just approved by the Board of Education. But we greatly appreciate the collaboration that we've experienced for these many months now between our two boards, and your efforts at understanding the reasons that we might do something like this under the circumstances.
Well, thank you. Next, we'll have with Connections Academy, we'll have a presentation from Erin Taylor. You up?
Thank you. I first want to thank the board for allowing us to come before you and to address the request that we have to serve more students this year. We've all stated that these are unprecedented times. They're also unsettling times. We hear daily from families that are frustrated with being on our wait list and really at their wits' end in their plan for their school choice for their students that are at home. We feel really good about the request that we are making because we are not forging new territory. The online virtual environment has been our model for decades, and we feel quite settled in what we're doing, and yet we're constantly striving to do it better. We believe that our online model will serve these students and these families by bringing education into their home where families feel safe, where they feel that their children are safe, and that offering is really of the utmost of importance. While we've had an influx of students that are interested in attending our school, we've also had an influx of very highly qualified teachers. And we are really thrilled with those that we have hired so far. We are prepared, should we be granted the expansion, to hit the ground running with hiring. We also feel that our model is quite scalable, so we are prepared with our platform, our curriculum, all of that is at the ready. Really, it's hiring good quality people and training them. We believe that the enrollment can be done in waves, so to speak, and as we hire, we will be able to enroll those students as quickly as possible. Again, we would not be before you if we didn't feel that we could do this with fidelity and ensuring these families that a quality education is what they'll receive. While they're looking for a safe environment, we also hold ourselves as an educational institution that is always striving to deliver the best quality product that we can. We are prepared to answer any of your questions as well. We feel that our board is very supportive of what we're doing. They also hold us accountable, as they should, for our academics, and we are excited to be able to offer this to more students and more families and move forward. We again state too, though, that we realize the expansion is just for the school year, and we are prepared with the transition plan based on whatever decisions are made at the end of the school year. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come before you today with our request, and if anyone has any comments, we are at the ready.
We'll do one additional presentation, and then we'll get to questions and comments from board members. So next we have Utah Virtual Academy, Megan Meredith and Brian Maxwell, who's the board president. guys on board here?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ryan Maxwell here, Mr. Chair. If
Okay.
you're ready, I'll go ahead.
Please do.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak on this critical topic for so many parents in our state. And I wanted to start out, Mr. Chair, with a thank you for the ability to come before your body today and to give two big thank yous to the board and your staff. Firstly, thanks to Superintendent Sid Dixon for speaking at our virtual graduation this year. She did a tremendous job, probably no surprise to you. She's just a great representative for the state board and for educators statewide, and she really inspired our graduating class. And a thanks to the board for the work that you put into the turnaround process in the state. I know it was legislation that was passed that you were charged with implementing, and it was a challenge, I think, to do. But I just want to say thank you for the resources that were provided. We have officially exited turnaround now, and we'll be taking those lessons that we learned along with us, along with our friends from the Utah Education Policy Center, who were so instrumental in improving the quality of instruction within our schools. So with that, I want to say thank you again for letting us come before you. Thousands of parents in the state right now are looking to UTVA, Utah Virtual, to provide a quality online education option during the pandemic. We recognize this is a temporary situation. However, we're pretty confident that we can serve these kids in a way that's meaningful to them so that their educational progress won't be hindered by the pandemic. The scope of the challenge that parents are facing right now and that we're facing is pretty substantial. We have a cap of 2,050 students, and currently between kids on our waiting list and then people with enrollment in process, that's about 2,500 additional students that are asking to be part of our program. With that demand, we also believe we have the scalability to meet the demand. And we believe our letter to the school board here on July 22nd kind of set out part of our plan. And legislative leaders have responded favorably to our data-driven approach and our desire to serve Utah families. The legislation is a work in progress, and so we come before you humbly asking for your help in serving these parents. We're not perfect. A school that enters turnaround could never claim to be perfect. But with 10 years within this online virtual education space, I can tell you during those 10 years being on the board, we've gradually improved the school with a quantum leap that we've taken during the 3 years we've been in turnaround. And like I said, we're grateful for the help. Districts and brick and mortar charter schools are going to experience some of those same challenges we had years ago when we first started, and they'll need time to make adjustments. And I want to make a commitment to the board here today that we stand ready to share our experiences to improve the entire Utah education ecosphere. That means if the board wants to ask for some thoughts on ways to address SEL issues or for extra supports in place for parents, online clubs and socialization opportunities, even though it's an online environment for many of these district schools now. We stand ready to help, and we want to be part of that education ecosphere improvement. We're not here to hide the secret sauce for the Big Mac. We want to be part of the solution here for the state during this pandemic. And with that, I conclude my presentation, and thank you again, Mr. Chair.
Chair Huntsman, are you there? Vice Chair.
Oh, there you go. I muted, so I didn't have any. So I'll restate that. I'm sorry. So at this time, board members, this is your time for questions and comments. We've heard from an introduction from Deputy Superintendent Stallings and Executive Director Lambert. We've heard from both schools. I think we know what's before us, but while you're getting ready with any questions or comments, I have one, and one of my, and as I dove into this is about managing expectations of parents and students and how they'll be met. And one of my concerns, and maybe I'll ask both schools this. It seems in the model that I'm kind of looking at here, you will hire and then enroll once you have teachers, educators and support staff in place. The question I have with this teacher shortage that we have, and I know things are kind of moving around with different teachers. Where are these teachers going to come from that are not already under contract to fill in these gaps? I'm taking this from a parent's perspective. This is a significant growth opportunity here. So if you could address that, or again, my question is, where are these teachers going to come from? Maybe can Connections Academy go first with that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you for the question. We are receiving applications from teachers who have decided to stay home based on the uncertain environment. They have either precarious situations in their home that would make even a blended learning model unsafe for them. We have teachers that have various situations where with child care, and that, as we all know, that's become an issue for many as well. So there are, I believe, a significant number of teachers who are uncertain about what the future holds for them in terms of their employability and making hard decisions. We're happy that we can keep them in an industry where we don't want to lose highly qualified people. And like I said, right now, we probably have 7 to 8 highly qualified applicants for our positions. We also have been working with people who had decided to go back to and get advanced degrees. And as we know, higher ed is experiencing their own challenges with this. So several of them have put those degrees on hold, and they are anxious to return to work if it's in this kind of environment. So we're thrilled that there are people out there. We're thrilled that we can keep teachers in our industries. We all feel very strongly about that. But they have their own challenges as well, right? So.
Okay, thank you. Utah Virtual Academy, can you respond to my question?
Yes, very similar to Utah Connections Academy. What we're hoping for in terms of teacher recruitment is that teachers who've considered retiring or leaving the public school setting due to the pandemic and the challenges there will reconsider and teach in our virtual environment for a year to help us through this. The other hope that I think we have is that there are qualified teachers who don't necessarily have to reside here locally, who may be searching out options as well. So we believe there's a pool of highly qualified educators out there who we can bring in to help us through this situation. But it's a great question, Mr. Chair. We will be having cohorts to try to track these new students as we hire to serve their needs.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just prepared to make a motion when you're ready for that.
Okay, I'm looking for additional questions or comments. Board Member Davis.
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering if you could address, one of you mentioned your transition plan at the end. You have a transition plan in place to get back to your cap numbers. Could you explain what that transition plan is? And I'm sorry if I missed that in any earlier documentation. And then also, could you each let us know what your current student-teacher ratios are and how you plan to maintain, if you plan to maintain those, and how you plan to do it? Actually, you probably already addressed the how part by hiring new teachers. Just if you could let us know what your current ratios are and how many teachers you would have to hire to maintain that.
Okay, so with those questions, we start with Connections Academy. Aaron Taylor.
Thanks for the question. That's a good question. As far as the transition plan, we have advisors that we have added. It's an advisory model that we've added to our school that allows for certified teachers to be working more closely with students. It's a progress monitoring tool. We envision that these advisors will also be helping us at the end of the year should our expansion requests not be granted and or things change and we have students and families that want to leave, that would help them return to a brick and mortar or a school of their choice. And we also recognize, to be honest, that our model is not for everyone. And so we have trained staff. We have a family coordinator that works in our office that works with families that enroll late in helping them transition to our model. And if families indicate that they wish to withdraw, or we would have to help those families find another place, she helps them with that as well. And to your other question, our ratios, they're 45-1 in our secondary school, which sounds large, but when you're online and you have the ability to bring school into the home, it is a lot easier. And then it is 50-1 in our elementary. We actually try to keep our class sizes lower in the K-3 than that ratio. That is more apparent than 50-1 in the upper elementary. We have, again, though, we have interventionists that are hired as well that don't count into that. And we have advisors who are certified teachers. So the schedule, our live lesson schedule that we have on a daily basis also allows us to invite students to break down the ratio further for more targeted instruction. The number of teachers will depend on the grade levels and where we see the biggest interest. I believe someone had mentioned earlier that most of the interest is K-8 and even more definitively K-5. And so we would be looking to hire teachers to fill those positions. And we're envisioning that we would need 16 to 18 based on what we see in that. That includes our SPED case managers based on the students that enroll with us. And it also includes counseling and advisory staff.
Utah Virtual Academy, you want to respond to the question?
Yes, Mr. Chair. It depends on how you count teachers versus instructors versus our kind of specialists for intervention and things. But if you're counting some of those admin staff, it's about 1 to 20, if I'm not mistaken, for student-teacher ratio. If you take out some of those specialists and just count instructors who are face-to-face with kids in a classroom setting, you're looking at something like 1 to 25 for our ratios. In order to maintain those ratios, it depends a little bit, like with Utah Connections, on where those teachers will be heading. We've seen a far higher demand as they have for elementary education teachers. And so it's likely, since those ratios are a bit higher in elementary school, we'd have to hire somewhere in the order of 40 to 50 teachers, depending on where they land. And then as far as a transition process, we have not applied for an extension of our cap beyond this pandemic year. It's our belief that a lot of these students will go back to brick and mortar when this time is over, and we'll work with parents on situations where that's not the case. But that's the basics of a transition plan for us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a follow-up, Member Davis?
No, thank you.
And I'm scrolling through my screen here. I really miss the in-person meetings. I'm not seeing any other hands with the exception of Board Member Haynes. You have, I think you wanted to make a motion.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As a
prepared motion that
yes.
can go on the screen? Or?
Yes.
Okay, our driver will post that, but go right ahead and make your motion.
Great. I am USBE's representative on the state charter board, and I sat through these presentations last week and felt like there was some great preparation there, and I appreciated that. But the motion that I have is that the board supports the state charter school board's motion to suspend the enrollment cap provisions of the state charter school board's charter agreements with Utah Connections Academy and Utah Virtual Academy for the 2020-21 school year only, including support for a temporary increase in student enrollment by 1,000 for Utah Connections Academy and 1,500 for Utah Virtual Academy for the 2020-21 school year only.
Hey, we have a motion. Is there a second?
This is Board Member Earl. I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Board Member Haynes, do you want to speak any further to your motion?
No, thank you.
Okay, discussion to the motion. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So the motion before the board is that the board support the State Charter School Board's motion to suspend the enrollment cap provisions of the State Charter School Board's charter agreements with Utah Connections Academy and Utah Virtual Academy for the 2020-21 school year only, including support for a temporary increase in student enrollment by 1,000 for Utah Connections Academy and 1,500 for Utah Virtual Academy for the 2020-21 school year only. There's a motion on the table. At this time, board members, please vote. I think we have one on phone. Was it Board Member Lee, are you still with us?
Yes, but I vote aye.
Aye, okay. Okay. And, oh, who is this one? Is Scott join us? I thought I heard another.
No, that was just me. This is just Lorraine. I just want to clarify again that Member Belknap is abstaining. Is that correct?
I was gonna call that out. So the voting is complete. The motion passes unanimously with Board Member Belknap abstaining from voting. Is that how you see it, Vice Chair Brittany Cummins?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. And thanks to all of those that participated in the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Board.
And next on our agenda is item 5, waivers from board rule, and presently we don't have any waivers submitted. Is that correct, Deputy Superintendent Stallings?
That is correct, Chair Huntsman.
Okay, board members, this concludes our business today. I want to thank you for meeting again, and another special board meeting. We seem to meet quite often, and for reasons that are important to public education. Seems like we're constantly adjusting ourselves to this pandemic and the situations that are before us. So thank you for attending this meeting, and also for all your good work, and also a shout out to staff and making these meetings happen. It seems like we meet very often. In fact, we'll be meeting again the 1st of September, and we're getting set up for in-person meetings. So board members, please pay attention to emails and texts from Lorraine and how we're gonna work that coordination. If you're not required in person, but we're gonna try to get that into that space of face-to-face meetings. So I don't see any other items that we needed to address. Vice Chair Brittany Cummins, have I missed anything?
No, sir.
Okay, board members, thank you for your work, and take care and be safe. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Have a great day.
All right.